Welcome to everyone here. I'm Carol Jenkins, Executive Director of Cystic Fibrosis Research Incorporated. This CF Discovery Series was developed in collaboration with Camille Wasowich, nurse practitioner at the Stanford CF Clinic. It was designed to make vital CF information accessible to the CF community. Before beginning, I'd like to note that no information tonight presented is intended for a patient's diagnosis or treatment. And as always, we urge you to work together with your healthcare team for medical treatment. Tonight, we look forward to our presentation on parenting when you have cystic fibrosis. Thanks to Genentech and CF Services Pharmacy for supporting this important evening. And with us tonight is Cesar Castellon from Cystic Fibrosis Services. Welcome to you. Our sponsors pay for the venue and refreshments, the studio we have here constructed, and other costs associated with the program. Tonight's program is being produced by your CFRI Live team, Eric Martin, Scott Wakefield, David Suhu, and Joanne Davis, who's tracking questions from our online participants. We are live at the Crown Plaza Cabana Hotel in Palo Alto, and I encourage you all to ask questions, whether you are here in the audience or part of our online community. And hello, especially to those of you who are at homes far away, perhaps even in the hospital. We're so glad that you can join us and tune in. Finally, thanks to our volunteers for serving food and helping us with our cross-infection guidelines. Our speaker tonight is Laura Steuer. She has cystic fibrosis and she is a mom. She's an educator with a master's degree from Stanford, and she's the chairperson of the Stanford Adult CF Advisory Council. Please welcome Laura Steuer.
Thanks, Carol. Tonight we're going to talk about parenting when you have CF. There's a lot of resources out there about how to be a parent to a child who has CF, but there is very little about how to be a parent when you have CF. So little that I couldn't find anything. There are a few blogs written by individual parents with CF, but there's no collected body of research or literature on this social phenomenon. It's interesting, given that the CF Foundation tells us that almost half of the CF adults, almost half of the CF population is an adult over the age of 18, and in the coming years, more than half will be an adult. So we see that as CF becomes a disease of adults, not of children, the issue of parenting is going to be at the forefront. And as we live longer and healthier, many of us will choose to become parents, whether biologically or adoptively or some other method. So if you or your spouse have CF and are parents, or if you're considering starting a family, then I hope you'll find something relevant in this talk. First, I want to tell you the most important takeaway of this talk. Beware of presenters. It is really easy to get that out. It's really easy for me to stand up here and give lots of information and tell you how to do this and make it all sound easy, but parenting of any kind is not easy. And our daughter is now 12. There's no way I could have given this talk when she was 3 or when she was a baby. So as with all presentations, take what works for you and discard the rest. Now, to introduce myself briefly, I notice when CF adults get together, we all turn into mathematicians, and I'm going to show you why. CF by the numbers. I'm 48. I was diagnosed when I was 6 weeks of age. I've been married 24 years. I have one child, she's 12, and I forgot to put up there my mutation is W1282X. So that's a bit about me. So the first question we want to ask is, how does CF affect your essential parenting roles? And the literature on this really relates to parenting with a chronic illness, and there isn't much of that literature either. And so I took that literature and I adapted it for the CF population, and also from my experience. The literature sort of points to 4 main categories where the CF intersects our parenting. First is communication. How do we talk to our kids about CF? Second is participation. How does our CF allow or limit our participation as parents? 3, family dynamics, how the CF impacts the entire family, the spouse and partner. And 4, support. Where do you get support? What kinds of support do you need? In this presentation, I'm going to focus mostly on 1 and 2 because that's what I know most about and that's where my passion lies. I will also touch on topics 3 and 4, but those topics could really be a presentation for another whole evening. So first, under communication. What do kids ask and how can you respond? Kids will ask everything about your CF, or they will ask nothing about your CF. And regardless, you have to come up with something to tell them. I think above all, you want to give them age-appropriate information. And I believe that talking about CF to kids is kind of like talking about sex. You give them exactly the answer they're looking for and no more. And then, if they want more information, they'll come and ask you later. And teachers and older parents and sex educators all know this about talking to kids about puberty. And we'll talk in the next slide about the different ages and stages of kids and exactly what you can tell them. But this is just a general outline. So for an example, for telling them exactly what they need to know more, I'm taking my enzymes, and my daughter, when she's a toddler, says, "Mommy, what are those pills?" To a toddler, I say, well, these pills help Mommy feel better. To an elementary school-aged child, I say, well, these pills help me digest my food so I get better energy. To a middle school-aged child, such as my daughter is now, I say, these pills help my pancreas, which really doesn't work very well. So at different ages and stages of your child's development, you'll want to give them the information that really fits for them. I think we need to make sort of a conscious, deliberate effort to talk about CF within our families and to our kids. Again, even if they don't ask. Ideally, it should really be just a normal, typical part of the household, and you want to get to the point where your son or daughter is so comfortable explaining your CF to their peers that their playmates can walk into the living room, say, "What is that big black machine?" And your child can say, "Oh, that's my mom's vest. She puts it on morning and night. It helps her lungs breathe better." And the kid goes, "Oh," and sort of that's the end of it, to kind of normalize the equipment and the medicine and the routines that other children will see around the house. And I think by talking about CF in this way, we really do our children a service by giving them realistic images of health and wellness. Because what we're telling them is, every body is different, and every body needs something different. So, Daddy can't eat that butter because of his cholesterol. You need to play hard at recess because it's good for your body. Mommy needs these pills because they help her body. And that kind of normalizes that there are different medical and health situations for everyone in the family, and then Mommy or Daddy, who has CF, doesn't quite seem so different from everyone else. I'm just going to drink water. Great. Okay, we'll talk about the ages in a minute, but I want to give some overviews that apply to all ages of children when you're dispensing age-appropriate information about your CF. Ultimately, kids are egocentric. It's all about them. They want to know that they are going to be reassured for, they'll be cared for, and they'll be loved. So you can say, before you go into the hospital, "I'm going in for my clean out, but Daddy will be here to take care of you." That reassures them that even when you're away, someone else is there, if not Daddy, Grandma, whoever the appropriate adult is. I think we want to be realistic and hopeful. You know, I had the slide honest and realistic. I don't like that. I don't like honest. I like realistic and hopeful when describing our CF, because honest, I think, brings with it possible fears that a child may not be able to handle till later relating to mortality, and I'll talk about that in a later slide. So be honest, in a hopeful way, and kids will suspect the worst, even if they don't ask anything. They will suspect the worst if they're not told the truth in a way they can understand. So on your way into the hospital, you can say, I'm going to the hospital to get better. I'll be there for 9 days. I'll have a medicine in my arm. It's an IV. It'll get me better. After 9 days, I'll come home, beginning, middle, and end. So they have a sense of management over the whole piece of you going away. So I've given you a lot of guidelines, and they all go out the window with this last item. They go out the window because kids' responses are unpredictable. You can talk and explain and think they get it, and they will surprise you over the years with how they understand your CF and how they make sense of your body. But it really doesn't matter if it's scientifically accurate as long as it sort of works for them. And when they're younger and they begin to have explanations like, well, mommy has CF because she has a cold all the time. Well, that isn't quite right, but that works for a young child, and you can sort of go with that until they're able to get more realistic explanations. So, on to the age groups. So, these age groups really apply for any child living in a house with chronic illness. And we can just fit it to CF. So the younger children, actually it's kind of easy. You can use picture books, dolls, Barbies to show doctor visits and show what it looks like when you're sick. Comfort objects such as blankie or teddy bear when you have to be in the hospital. Books with stories of mom or dad being sick. I don't know if there's any CF books on that, but there's certainly books about chronic, not terminal illnesses in the family, using pictures of healthcare objects, pictures of an IV, this is what it's going to look like, pictures of the needle, this will be my shot, even playing with a doctor's kit to let your child kind of act some of that out. Young children at this age will often think that the disease is their fault or that it's someone's fault. And again, they may not tell you that, but that's part of their developmental thinking. And so you just want to be aware of that and reassure them it's not their fault. CF just is. I used to say to my daughter when she was little, I have blue eyes, I have brown skin, I have CF. There it is. It's just part of me. Next age group. This is the age group I'm in with my preteen. A child approaching adolescence may really feel embarrassed by a parent who looks or behaves differently, so you want to be aware of that and allow them some extra moodiness for reacting to you. And a school-aged child is really developing a strong interest in their body, and they may start to be baffled why mommy or daddy's body doesn't quite work or seem to be the same way theirs is. And so you just want to let them know, him or her, that you're always there to talk. A child around this age begins to understand that death is forever, and they may have fears of dying. The issue of mortality as a parent with CF could be an entire different subject, but I'm just going to mention that at some point I think every child will ask that question. And our daughter was about 10, just approaching 10, when she came up to me and said, Mommy, are you going to die? And I composed myself because I knew the question was coming. You do need to know it's coming. And I said, oh, no one knows when they're going to die. I'm going to live a long, long time. And that worked for her, and she went off. And about 6 or 8 months later, I think the beginning of 5th grade, she came back and she said, Mommy, are you going to die before the other mothers? Which was a fine-tuning of the question and a fine-tuning of her understanding of CF. And I basically said, well, I can't promise that I'm going to live as long as a mother without CF. But I know that I'm going to live a long time, take really good care of myself, and be around to nag you for many years. So, hopeful, realistic information on issues of death. But be aware that a child this age starts to conceptualize the meaning of death. Also, similar to the younger age groups, movies and books that have similar storylines, a mom or dad who is ill that they can relate to, and provide special time with a non-CF parent. When you're in the hospital, that's a special time for the child to bond with the parent who's not in the hospital. And they'll kind of be bonding anyways because that parent who's not in the hospital will be doing laundry and dishes and carpooling and everything else. So they will be bonding. Hopefully they'll be bonding. So, whoops. I'm missing a slide. Well, no worries. I'm missing a slide. I'll just talk about it. The next slide shows the teenage years and age 12 through 17. And if you write to CFRI, they can send you my entire presentation and that slide that's missed, or it may show up later. Basically, if you've made it the teenage years, hallelujah, you've done most of the work. I have a 12-year-old, so write to me and tell me what's coming up ahead. But basically, with a teenager, CF should now be part of their regular understanding of what this is about. Although as your health progresses, and if it does deteriorate, that will be new understandings for them. For a teenager, you want to speak with direct, reality-based information, facts, diagnoses, treatments, side effects. And it really helps if you can talk from a scientific or medical standpoint because they have the cognitive ability to understand it, and it helps to depersonalize it, take the fear away. So you can talk about pulmonary issues rather than daddy's lungs, and it makes it just feel a little bit safer. Well, maybe that slide will come up later, who knows? Nonetheless. Okay, so we've thought about what kids ask and how we can respond, and we've talked about age-appropriate information. I talked about the deliberate messages, but you also need to think about the unconscious messages, what you don't say and what you don't share or do about your CF, and that's primarily the emotions. On the one hand, we don't want our fear, our frustration, our dejection, our anxiety to really overshadow the family about our CF. On the other hand, showing those emotions may really be helpful for the child to express his own emotions. So, for example, your child says, "Mom, I'm really scared when you go to the doctor." And you can say, "Yeah, I'm a little scared too. I'm not sure what's going to happen this time." Or you can say, "Yeah, I was scared, but last time I went, everything turned out okay, and this is what happened, and so I know now they'll do the same thing and that'll be okay." And that also helps the child to articulate their own medical experiences when they have to go to the doctor for their shots and other pediatric issues. Which relates to that. We want to give children realistic images of health and wellness. And I think when you talk very naturally about a disease, sort of a balanced approach, they sort of get a sense of that within the household. You may notice that when you're sick, they want a lot of extra attention. Suddenly their boo-boos are devastating and they must have bandages. Suddenly their headaches are just terrible and they must have a Tylenol. And what they're doing is just emulating what they see mom or dad doing. And it's a way to kind of say, look, I'm like mom or dad. I can be sick and get all these special things. And it's just a way to get attention. And so you can go with that. Just be aware of it and try not to overreact. You might also notice change in behavior around major CF changes. So, for example, a new diagnosis, a significant change in treatment, or a hospitalization. I notice that whenever I go into the hospital for a clean-out, our daughter is perfect. I hope she's watching. Perfect, well-behaved, helpful, supportive, loving, and when I get out after the 9 or 10 or 12 days, she falls apart, has a complete and utter meltdown. It took me a while to realize this pattern, but now that I know it as a parent, I can anticipate where she can hold herself together and where she can't. And different children may at different times. So just be aware that the realistic images are sort of a balancing act for them as they learn to balance that. So, section 2, participation. How do you participate as a parent when you're ill? I'm going to move my papers just a moment. So your participation will really change on your daily healthcare situation, your meds, your energy, your fatigue. Are you coming into an exacerbation? Are you coming out of the hospital? And we already know with CF that we're in it for the long haul, right? We know it's a marathon. There's nothing new that I can tell you about that. But I think it's okay to just balance our abilities and limits and know that there's certain ways to cope when you don't feel well. It is okay to lie on the sofa or lie on the couch and passively parent instead of actively parent. Sit with your child and read a book, do a puzzle. Some parents have an activity room in the corner of the bedroom or the living room where the kids can play while you can just lie down if that's really all you can do that day. And I think the most important thing for a child with CF is to know that their mom or dad is healthy, or that their mom or dad is as healthy as they can be. And we all struggle with that at times. We all struggle with our own self-care in this long marathon of compliance of chronic illness. And if you can identify what sabotages your self-care, it will help your parenting. So, for example, my sabotage is 7 a.m. I get up, I'm excited, I'm full of energy, I feel good in the morning, not everybody does. I make the lunch, I make the snack, we pack up, I take my daughter in the carpool, I drive home, I get started on email, I go to work, and lo and behold, I've forgotten my vest and my treatments. And this has happened so many times, you'd think I would have learned, but this is my sabotage point. So for me to really address this requires sitting down, reassessing the schedule with my spouse, saying, do I need to get up earlier? Do you need to drive her those days? Do you need to make the lunch and I'll make the snack? Kind of reconfiguring that co-parent conversation if I know that moment, because of parenting, sabotages my self-care. And the flip side of that is, to find your moment of strength. When are you your best physically? Are you more tired in the morning or more tired in the afternoon? Are you more tired the week after you've come out of the hospital because your adrenaline is up, or are you less tired? And sort of play off those and push yourself as a parent then, knowing that you're going to back off when you don't feel well. And I think this brings us to a really key question in parenting. And when we ask what are parenting tasks and how do we participate in being a parent, most people would say feeding, dressing, carpool, education, play dates. But I want to suggest a completely different model for parenting. Carol, my next slide is not there. So I'm going to look because there's a critical slide. It's not there. Oh, gosh. Well, no worries. Okay. Let me tell you what the next slide says. The next slide has participation right up there, and it's got a big sentence that says, a different perspective on parenting. And then the next sentence says, reframe the idea of parenting. That's it, 2 sentences on the slide. So I'll tell you what it says. I want to suggest that we reframe the concept of parenting from those concrete tasks of dressing and feeding and play dates and carpools to something more subtle, something about love and hugs and teaching and values and time spent. Because CF may get in the way of those concrete parenting tasks, but it is not going to get in the way of those subtler tasks. And I think it gives us a more powerful type of parenting. I wish this slide was there. I guess now we learned something here in Silicon Valley. We should have checked our slides. But I think to parent that way, to focus not on these concrete tasks that I may or may not be able to do because I don't feel well, and to focus on the love and everything else, gives me an advantage. And the advantage is this. The current parenting literature, if you've read any of it, and there was just an article out in the New York Times by Madeline Levine about this very topic, is we want to raise kids who are resilient. We don't want kids who are sheltered and coddled and have everything done for them. We want resilient, empathic children. And I can't think of a better way to raise a resilient, empathic child than to live in a household with a chronic illness such as CF. See, I wish I had that slide. It's great. Had a good picture, too, but that's all right. No worries. All right, last two topics I'm going to touch on really quickly. So family dynamics. Again, family dynamics is sort of a subset of parenting and could be another whole talk. We know that CF places burden on us. Parenting places a burden on the relationship. So when you've got the bowl of the relationship and you throw in parenting and you throw in CF, you've got a lot of extra baggage in there. Burden on resources, more stress, more emotions. The emotional impact on your spouse or partner as a parent really has to be taken into consideration. It's likely that they're picking up some of the slack of the co-parenting duties, especially when you're ill. So are they frustrated? Are they burnt out? Are they resentful? Are they mourning the loss of having this healthy co-parent to share raising their children with? So something to be aware there. Does your CF consume the whole family? That completely contradicts everything else I already said in my talk. On the one hand, you want CF to be the normal fabric of your household. No one blinks an eye, your child can explain it. On the other hand, you don't want it to overshadow and impact and give sort of a negative flavor to everything you do. And that's kind of a hard balance to walk, and it's one that I struggle with all the time. And lastly, support. There's all kinds of support. As someone with CF, you're probably already getting support from family and friends. If not, you should. And this is the last topic for tonight. So, thinking about what kind of support do you receive already, and what kind of support do you need? You may or may not already have friends and family helping you emotionally, physically, practically with your CF, but your needs as a parent are going to change. You will need tools to help cope, support groups and friends and family, and possibly therapy or other communication methods, humor. We have this image of parenting as we have to do everything ourselves. And I can tell you with CF, as with any other issue like this, that's simply not possible. Your CF has to be your first priority. If you have not been in the habit of telling everyone about your CF, start now, before you have your kids or when they're young. And I decided to do that. I had gone most of my 20s and early 30s hiding my CF. I didn't tell a soul. And then I finally decided to tell everyone under the sun. And it made it easier because when I had to ask for help, they knew why. I didn't have to give a big preamble. It was very clear to them, and we know people like to help. And they like to help when they get what's going on. They feel they can be part of a larger picture. Oh, that's right, Laura CF, I know about that. So start talking to people. And I just want to remind everyone that your CF has to be your first priority. So press this button often. Your children will not suffer. They will not fail out of school. They will still get to college if their mom or dad makes their CF the first priority. And you'll end up with a more empathic and resilient child than you ever imagined. So in closing, minus the two slides, we go back to the core question: how does your CF affect your essential parenting roles? And so I've grouped it here into these 4 topics, which the literature kind of lends itself to. And I think the 4 topics can just be sort of a starting point for parents to identify what they want to work on. So for myself and my husband, communication and participation down. We've got it. We feel confident. I feel really clear about how I've communicated with our daughter about the disease. Family dynamics, not so much. That's my weak area. My weak area is self-care, and that does affect the dynamics. So I know that's something I have to work on. And with your spouse and partner at every stage of your kid's development, you want to talk about these issues and where you need more work, less work, more changes, less support. So I have here a tiny little slide with a tiny little print that I don't know if anyone beyond the room can see. It occurred to me. So write to CFRI and they'll probably send it to you. But these are all the resources that I used to put the presentation together. And in conclusion, I'd like to say 2 dedications. One, I'd like to acknowledge that this is 9/11, the anniversary of that event. And second of all, I'd like to dedicate this talk to the memory of my father, Judah Folkman. Because if you could not find him researching in the lab, and you could not find him operating on his patients, you could find him at a podium, showing slides, giving a talk. Thank you.
Questions?
I was wondering if is your daughter somewhat protective over you?
The question is our daughter protective? That's very interesting. She is 12. Only the last couple of years has she been. I would say from age 0 to 9, she wasn't particularly. The first time I really saw her protectiveness was when I had to be hospitalized for the first time when she was very little, some years ago. And I think that really scared her. But I think, the tendency is for us to let our kids help and let our kids take care of us, and there's something called parentalizing. You don't want to parentalize your child. You want to tell them about your CF, but it's not their job to take care of your CF. So if you're sick, maybe they bring you some chicken soup, but they don't wash out your nebulizers for you, right? Your disease is your disease, and they shouldn't have to bear the burden of that sort of logistics of it. I would say the older she gets, and the more she realizes about what CF really is, and she hears that I'm going to talks and conferences and sees these notes, she's protective when I get sick. When I'm not sick, she's just like a regular preteen, and I might as well be someone way back in the wall, not embarrassing her in front of her friends. Does that answer your question? Hi, online audience. Where do I look?
You can look at the camera and
Okay.
talk to them online. Okay. This question is, how do you deal with the first school, oh, wait a minute, I've gotten too many coming in. Is there any advice for parenting and handling family dynamics for late CF diagnosis? My daughter was almost 13 when I got my CF diagnosis 4 years ago.
Again, it could be a whole separate workshop. I think it's very much the same, but I think it's maybe more of playing catch-up. I think that might be the same as any adult diagnosis, such as cancer or MS. And there's actually a lot of literature on those diseases, adult onset diseases, that they can refer to. Lupus, MS, and cancer come to mind. Non-terminal situations about, how do you explain a disease to your child that all of a sudden comes out of the woodwork they haven't grown up expecting. Other than that, I think everything is the same. Other than that first moment of revelation when you sit down and say, wow, I just learned I have this thing, this is what it means. I think everything else is the same, depending on the age of the child and how you go forward explaining. You might just have to talk faster because you have a little more to cover.
The next question, again from the online audience, is how did you deal with the first school years when presumably your child brought home lots of viruses and infections, which exposes you?
Well, I was, for better or for worse, at the same time an elementary school teacher. So I was already getting sick. I didn't really find that she brought home particularly a lot of anything, and that may be her constitution. She's pretty healthy, and we practice pretty good germ control. We wash hands before we eat. But because she was rarely sick, I was rarely sick. And I would love someone in the medical community to look into some immunity between parent and child, because I get sick far more often from her friends or my students than from her. But I don't know any data on it. But I think it's the same as if you have CF and you're a teacher, which many of us are, or you have CF and you work in a public setting. You just have to be extra careful. And you also have to inform the parents of those kids that, if Susie has a runny nose, she can't come over today. And you'll have to explain it over and over and over again. Because, kids with runny noses, they all play together. Nobody cares. It's good for immunities, right? But you'll need to explain why it's not safe to do. Or if Susie is sneezing, they can't come over to your house and play. And you just have to be really adamant on that. I'm looking there, I don't know where to look.
I have a question.
Yes,
You
David.
say that you wanted to take care of yourself first. So how does guilt come into play, in the family dynamics when you basically are taking care of yourself first?
So guilt was on the missing slide, so I'm glad you asked it. I think guilt is in there. I think you just have to temper it. And it's sort of, well, I'm going to feel guilty or I'm going to be healthy, right? I struggled with that for a long time when our daughter was younger, and I didn't take as good care of myself. And I sort of switched into that mode of, I'm going to put my health the first priority because the most important thing she needs is a mommy to live as long as she possibly can. I think the guilt can be worked on through therapy. I've had a lot of therapy around my CF and being a parent who may be sick. How long will I live? But I think the guilt is just there, and to try to push it away and pretend it isn't there, I don't think is good. You just sort of say, yeah, I feel guilty that I'm taking my vest now rather than playing with her, but that means I'm going to be stronger to play with her later. And I also think this is part of this modern parenting idea that we think we have to be with our kids at every moment, and some of the backlash literature on resilient parenting says you don't need to. Children can play by themselves for hours just fine, and they won't be scarred. So if you're taking your meds or sleeping or eating or doing your vest and your kids are on their own somewhere safely in the house without you, they're fine. In fact, they're gathering independence.
So if you do feel guilty, do you communicate that to your family?
Do I communicate my guilt to the family? I don't share it with my daughter. I share it with my husband at times. I would say that probably more sharing of it would be better. It would be better to say, I feel frustrated that I have to sit and do this vest, and that's going to make us, run late for the movie. Or, you're all waiting to go out, but I got to do this. I think I express it more as frustration than guilt, which may not be the best way to do it.
Thanks.
Where are those slides? They were good. I know.
This is another question from the online audience, but it's in segments. So for the person who asked this question, if I don't get it all, please re-enter it in the chat box, and I'll try again. This is someone who's saying that they're overwhelmed working full-time and raising 2 kids. Keeping up on the CF stuff gets challenging. Can you talk about making the decision to quit work if you're a parent with CF?
Is that my sister?
No, but your sister is online.
Oh, okay. My entire family on the East Coast is on. Hi, everybody. Hi, Boston. So the question is, talking about the decision to quit work. Well, I did quit work. I left working full-time. I was teaching full-time. I was getting sick a lot, and I just couldn't do it. And I found that I could either work really well or take care of my disease really well, and I wasn't doing both. Some people manage both really well. Not working is not a financial option for everyone, of course. So I guess we can only address the fact if it is a financial option, which is, I guess, what the person is asking. Can you repeat the middle phrase, which is how do you deal with quitting work?
Yeah. Can you talk about making the decision to quit work if you're a parent with CF?
So the decision for me was really clear. I was teaching in a middle school. I was tired all the time. I wasn't eating lunch. I was grabbing breakfast, which is the way most people in America go to work, right? They have a cup of coffee for work and a banana, and I was losing weight. And I was feeling worse and worse and worse and exhausted. And probably my husband or someone said, come on, you can't go this way. And I left that job. That was in fall 2000. I left that job and I left the full-time workforce at the same time. I work part-time. I have my own business, my own projects that lets me manage my time. That may or may not be a decision for everyone. I felt really guilty, to go back to David's guilt. I felt really guilty about no longer being a partial breadwinner, raised in the 70s, here I am a woman, I have a job, and I'm independent, and here I am jumping out of the career stream. But I think we just have to kind of give ourselves the message that our lives are most important in order to be there for our children. And if we're running ourselves down, we will get sick, and that doesn't benefit our children. If you don't have children, I guess you can run yourself down as much as you like, and then it's a spouse-partner question, how much they can put up.
We have questions that are just coming in.
Good.
Would you take your child to the hospital when you have checkups, or should you
Yes.
leave them at home?
Yes.
And is there an age appropriateness
Yes.
to this decision?
Yes. Okay, so it depends on the child. We have one child. I tend to sort of take her everywhere in terms of into the grown-up world. We don't have a nanny, just because I thought, I'll just bring her with me into the world. So if I go to a meeting, she sat in the waiting room. If I, went to the appointment, she would come. She doesn't do it anymore because, it's irritating and she's 12 and she has her own peer group. But I would take her because it's sort of the normal fabric of my life. And I thought, if I'm taking her to Safeway, which is a fun adventure when you're a kid, right? And you're going to the dry cleaners, which is an adventure when you're a kid, then why not go to the doctor? Because that's the normal part of mommy's routine. And, she would sit out in the waiting room with the movies and not go into the inner room, of course, where the medical information would be discussed, and we get a treat afterwards. And that may not be practical if you have more than one child, absolutely. I would say up until age 7, you can get away with it. Past age 7, there's some tweener, tween, preteen stuff, and they may roll their eyes and say, oh, Mom, I don't want to come with you. And that may be their fear, or simply they want to stay home and play with their friends. But I took her pretty much everywhere, which I think actually contributes to her sense of health and wellness. She's unfazed by needles. She's unfazed by blood. When she gets sick, although she doesn't like needles, but she really doesn't bat an eye. When I say, you've got to go to the hospital, or you have to go to the doctor, she says, okay, because she knows what that's about.
Let's see. What would you say to those with CF considering having children?
Well, there's many facets to the question. There's the medical facet, which only you and your doctor. Do I look into there? I'm looking at you.
You can look at me.
Hi, person is asking. I know, it's so bizarre not to talk to someone there, but I'll talk to you.
Okay.
So there's the medical aspect, right? What is your health status? Will you live long enough, likely, to be there for your child? Only you and your doctor and your spouse or partner can answer that. So I'm going to leave that part aside because that's not my area of expertise. But let's assume you're healthy enough to live, into their growing up years, whether you have the child biologically or adoptively or something else. I think it just involves those conversations with your spouse or partner. What other stresses are going on in our family right now? Is there a financial stress? Is there, someone's brother getting divorced that's causing stress? Has a family member just died, a grandparent? What else is sort of rocking the boat at that moment? And you can never find a perfectly still moment, right? There's always something. It's not like you can say, oh, the family's fine, let's have kids right now. But I think you just have to assess that, and then I think you have to sort of look at my talk and look at some of the things I presented there and see if you're really ready to take those on. On the one hand, the question could be without CF, right? Is someone ready to be a parent? Who knows, right? You're never ready to be a parent until you're suddenly a parent, and then you learn on the fly completely. So I think it's the same for CF. If your health can bear it and you have the support to run the course, then it's a viable option.
Let's see. Did you have any pregnancy issues, and is your CF the reason you only have one child?
That's a super question. We tried for 3 years to get pregnant. I was both not able to get pregnant, which they said was a CF issue due to cervical mucus, and when I was able to get pregnant, I wasn't able to hold the pregnancy. I'm a DES daughter, which means that in the 60s, my mother took a particular drug which was given to women at that age to prevent premature miscarriages. the DES does some deformation to the uterus, and so we were never clear of the interplay between CF and DES, and it doesn't matter, I wasn't getting pregnant. We finally went to IVF. The IVF worked for us after one round. If it hadn't worked, our next plan was to go either adoption or surrogacy. We didn't get to that point. This was in 2000, so I already know by now there's a million other ways, technologies, to have a baby. So the IVF worked for us. We didn't decide to just have one because it was difficult to get pregnant. It was because the pregnancy took a little bit of my health away. And for all women, right, without CF, a pregnancy takes a little bit away from you, and you can bring it back. But I was never quite able to get it back. My lung function went down a little bit. My pancreatic function went down, just a little bit. And I decided I didn't want to give any more away, which may be a selfish decision. I can also give a talk about how to raise a single child so they're not precocious, but that's a separate thing. And I just thought, I don't have enough energy to take care of myself and one child, because I'm like a child already. I got to take care of me, and then a child, that's two people to take care of, and for me, that was enough. For someone with a greater amount of energy, more power to them, because I think kids do benefit from having siblings. Long, personal answer. See what I mean by telling everybody everything?
What are some energy managing strategies you use?
I don't have very many. So remember the 4 topics? Can I get them back on, or is off? That's okay. The 4 topics: communication, participation, family dynamics, and support. So I'm very confident and strong with communication and participation. I'm weak in family dynamics. I struggle with my own self-care, and I struggle with balancing my own energy. And I tend to take on too much, like many women do, regardless of CF, and find myself on overload and then find myself having to back out. So I think it's just kind of knowing oneself and saying, okay, I just can't take that on, because if I do that thing, which meets in the evening, like now, when am I going to get home to do my vest and my treatment? If I join that committee, which meets in the morning, how am I going to get in my exercise? And really thinking deliberately and having your calendar in front of you before you say yes, and just not giving too much away. I also think not working as a CF mom is a tremendous help. I work part-time, and that allows me to balance. I can work when I want to. It's my own business, and so when I need to rest, I just stop working. I just, the store is closed for the day. But not everyone has that freedom to do so. More.
Do you find that exercise is very helpful with your self-care?
I just want to say one thing about the comment more. I am really glad there's more, because this topic is so unaddressed in the CF community, and in the next 10 years, it's going to pop. The psychosocial aspects of being a parent with CF is going to be out there, and patients and caregivers are going to have to address it as more and more of us are able to do it. So the question is, how...
Do you find that exercise is very helpful with your self-care?
Yeah, I think there isn't a CF doctor out there who would say don't exercise within reason. It works for pulmonary clearance. It does all kinds of great things. I use it mostly as a mood stabilizer. So when I exercise, my mood is really good. When I don't exercise, my mood is quite fragile, and then I'm not a good mom and wife. But I don't think there's anything to do with CF. I just think, as adults, as parents, we've got to have some outlet. We've got to take care of ourselves. So fit and exercise as a parent, and as a CF parent, it's just a matter of juggling your schedule, as with anything. Does that answer the question? I guess they can't say yes. Do they type in yes? I don't know.
I didn't. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
He or she says yes.
I guess we can give my email out, not here worldwide, but maybe CFRI has it, and then I can take further questions.
Here's a comment from our viewer in Australia, thanking you for talking on such a great topic. And is there any way I can share this with other CF adults here in Australia.
Yes, will you fly me down there? Because I'd love to. If you hire me, I will come. I'm happy to share the presentation, the PowerPoint, including the slides that are missing. So just contact CFRI and we'll figure out how to get the whole PowerPoint to you.
Yeah, and
All slides.
We will have tonight's presentation will stay on Ustream. There will also be a link to it
Okay.
on the CFRI website. So
Okay.
anyone who wants to share this with their friends or colleagues can direct people there, so.
Or invite me to speak.
Do you exercise, let me see, do you exercise as a family? Do you have exercise activities as a family?
Do you mean, do we all do the same exercise together?
Or maybe play a sport or something?
So we do not. We're not that type of athletically inclined family. My husband and my daughter are more athletic and stronger than I am. So they do things together. They go on long bike rides. They just rode 21 miles this weekend. They run together. They'll go to the pool together. They'll play a little softball. I tend not to be able to participate in those, nor am I interested. So I mostly do aerobics and yoga, those type of exercises. Intermittent. I'm not super with my aerobics compliance. Occasionally we go on hikes as a family. I really love the idea of that, and I think that would really help because then the whole family is doing something that's good for everyone, but it's also good for mom or dad with CF. Going to the previous question, exercise is indicated for airway clearance, and if you can get the whole family to do it, then it's more of a natural part rather than just, okay, I got to go swim some laps because my doctor said so. We just don't, because that's not the dynamic of it.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay,
A lot of thank yous.
thank you.
Well, let me join you. Okay, go ahead, join.
I think you actually asked this a little bit, again, talked about this a little bit earlier. Did you always work part-time? How do you suggest backing down from a full-time career to better manage advancing CF and family responsibilities and handling the emotional side, depression or lack of work?
That is a huge question.
That is a huge question.
Email me because I have a lot to say on it. But I started out working full-time. I was an elementary school teacher. I taught grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, middle school. And I worked in schools for a while doing curriculum. And in there, kind of having our child, raising her, being a mom, I sort of went back and forth from part-time to full-time. But I never would have said I'm not working. Whereas now if you say, are you working? I go, oh, I'm working part-time. I think it never occurred to me that I would have to downsize until that time as I described, and I just started feeling really, really sick. In fact, I didn't pay attention because one year when I was teaching 5th grade, I got incredibly sick and I had to be hospitalized in the middle of the semester. And it was one of my first hospitalizations, and I still didn't get it. Like, oh, maybe this, you shouldn't be doing this. So it took a few years for me to finally say, I can't do both. I have to make a choice. I need to choose my health so I can be a better mom and wife, and mom being the focus of this talk. At that point, I was so burnt out and so tired of working and couldn't wait to get off the merry-go-round that for me, there wasn't a lot of, guilt and sadness and loss. I was so done. I guess I stayed too long at the party, but if you do, then you don't have to deal with those feelings. But I also made sure when I was getting ready to leave that I had in mind the next thing I would do, which was volunteering in a part-time business. So I didn't have this big empty space of, oh God, I have nothing, I'm only a CF patient, all I have to do is take my meds. I kind of prepared, kind of like a retiree might do, right? They leave their full-time work and then they kind of think about their part-time work next. But this person can definitely email me. I think it's different for men and women also who are leaving the workforce if they're jumping off a major career path. Mine wasn't so major, so it was harder to jump off. It was less hard to jump off.
This is a good question. They're all good questions.
They're all
but
good
I like this one. If you had to tell non-CF spouses 3 things about how CF affects your parenting, what would you say?
Is that for my husband? Okay, Brian, if you're watching.
It may be,
If
but
you
I'm
have
not
to
gonna-
tell,
I'm not
I
gonna
know,
rat
I
him out
know.
if it
HIPAA laws prevent us. If you had to tell a non-CF parent 3 things about your parenting, what would they
About
be?
how CF affects your parenting.
About CF parenting. So this is what I would say, and it's individual for each person, because each person's CF is very different from another person's. We're not in a box. I would say my CF makes me more tired than I want to be. My CF makes me tired at times where all I want to do is burst out and cooperate and play and be with everyone in the family, and that's really frustrating. And I would say that my CF makes me feel like sometimes I control the family too much. So we're out on errands, and, you know, those of us with CF who are trying to gain calories eat a lot if we have pancreatic issues, and I need to eat all the time, and we'll be going out on errands, and I'll say, I got to eat, you know, and unless I brought something with me, the whole family has to stop while I go grab a burger. And I do feel guilty about that, even though I know I need to do it because I got to keep up my calories. So I would say I feel badly that piece of my CF has consumed the whole family, like in that slide, that you all have to stop while I go grab something to eat. Because you can only drink so many Ensures, really, you know.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay,
So,
Carol, thank you.
So now I will join you.
Okay,
Okay. Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Tonight, we have been listening to Laura Steuer at our CF Discovery Series. Many thanks again to Genentech and to CF Services for supporting this effort here at the Crown Plaza Cabana Hotel. And do stay in touch with us on our website. We will have further information from Laura. Clearly, she's inviting your questions, so we'll all be in touch, and you will be able to access this presentation. And thank you again.
Thank
We're
you.
glad to have you here.
Thanks.
Thank you all.